this video, I'm going to show you how to make up a sushi roll. Once you've finished knitting the piece of sushi, you'll have something that looks like this. A long strip with short areas of one colour in the middle and longer stretches of white and black at the end. Before you start, you need to check everything is the correct length by rolling it up. So start with the colourful parts on the inside and roll it fairly tightly. When you come to the black part, which is the seaweed of the sushi, you want this to wrap around once completely, and it's good to have it pulled a little bit tight so that it isn't too loose. To make up your sushi roll, you'll need an embroidery needle, a sewing needle with a large head, big enough for the yarn to go through. So first, what you want to do is tuck all these loose ends inside the sushi so that it isn't poking out the end and looking untidy when you're finished. Begin by threading a loose end of yarn onto your embroidery needle, and then to tuck it out of the way, just pass your needle through a couple of stitches, sort of into the middle of the piece. Be careful not to go through to the other side. It doesn't really matter much at this point, but when you get down to the black part, the stitches will show if you push through, so try and keep it all on one side. Once that piece of yarn is tucked out of the way into the middle, you can secure it further by making a knot. Once the yarn is secure, you can just snip off the end and that piece is dealt with. So let's look at another example of that. Again, thread the yarn onto your embroidery needle and pass the yarn a couple of stitches through into the middle, making sure that you don't go through to the other side, and then secure it again with a small knot. Once the yarn is secure, you can trim the end. Around this middle part of the sushi, you have quite a few different colours and so a lot of different ends that need to be trimmed off. But before you trim the last one off, and it's usually good to leave one that's perhaps a little bit longer than this, this is the yarn you're going to use to secure the starting of the rolling process when you roll your sushi. So begin by passing your yarn through your embroidery needle and then rolling up the knitting with the colourful part on the inside. The start should be rolled quite tightly so it doesn't come loose, and then when you reach the part where your yarn is, start passing the needle through these stitches and then down through the white stitches below to hold it in place. Once you've made a few stitches with this excess piece of yarn, you can just tie a knot here to secure it. Once you've rolled up the first part of your sushi, you can continue rolling along the white part, which is the sushi rice. For this part, I've left a much longer tail of excess yarn to secure it with. If your piece of yarn isn't long enough, you can always attach a new piece here. So again, thread the yarn onto your embroidery needle, and then just pass the needle in and out from the white to this part here where the white and the black join, and this is the part where it's important not to pierce your needle all the way through to the other side, because this is the point where the stitches will show. Carefully pick up the top stitches without piercing through. Once you've secured it all the way along that edge, you can use the excess yarn to secure it further in the middle by piercing your needle all the way through the sushi. So pierce it all the way through and carefully pull the yarn tight. And once the yarn runs out, don't continue pulling or it will warp the shape of the sushi. So this is just to add a bit more structure to it and make it a bit sturdier through the middle. Once you've had a couple of securing stitches through the middle, you can just tie off your yarn and then trim the excess. And then for the final layer of rolling up your sushi, you can see that if it's rolled loosely, the black part doesn't actually reach all the way around. That's because it's been designed that you need to pull it a little bit tighter for it to reach a full circle. This just means that the outside is a little bit loose, a little bit tighter, and it won't easily peel away from the sushi. So wrap it nicely around and try and line it up so that it's straight with the row of stitches here. And again, with a long yarn, thread your yarn onto your embroidery needle. And here when you pass through, try and do it quite neatly. This is the outside of the sushi, so this is what will be on show. Once you've reached the end, at this point I usually like to add a little knot just to secure it. And then again with the excess yarn, I like to add some securing stitches again through the middle of the sushi. You'll need quite a long needle to push all the way through, but you can always reduce the size of your sushi by squishing it between your fingers. When you're doing these securing stitches, be careful not to let the needle pierce through any part of the sushi that's a different colour, so not through the white part or the coloured centre, just straight through from black to black. once you've added some securing stitches through the centre of your sushi, you can again create a small knot to hold the final piece of yarn in place. And then to trim the ends, you want to trim this neatly so that you don't have a little piece of yarn sticking out. First, pierce your yarn again all the way through your sushi. And this time, once the yarn has all completely come through, you should pull it quite tight. And then when it's tight, cut the end. And then because it's been tight on the inside, once you let go and squish the sushi a bit, that loose end of yarn will just disappear inside the sushi. And there we have it. That's how to roll up your knitted sushi.